Joining us now is Shane Cashman, an investigative journalist and the host of Inverted World Live at Timcast Media. Shane, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey there, thanks for having me.
Okay, let's dive into Area 51. This is weird.
Mhm.
Gothic fire breaks out 4th of July, funny enough. I
Yeah.
don't know if that date has any significance, but breaks out and conveniently right around Area 51 in Nevada, right after a bunch, hundreds, it seems like, employees, former employees at the base, servicemen say that they have cancer now. And
Mhm.
the death rolls show that they've died younger than average. And what do you think? First of all, so I've always heard of Area 51, but what, why do people think for sure aliens are being tested there and housed there?
There's the mythology runs deep there. Bob Lazar is someone that people talk to a lot. He said he claims to have worked at Area 51 and had seen alien entities. People either love him or hate him. It's one of those things where Area 51 claimed he never worked there, but then there are other people later on who said they did know him. So it's just like this total distortion of information. You don't know who to trust, but it's just been part of that lore forever after like the Roswell crash. After all these different UFO stories, it became this deep mythology in the extraterrestrial world. But it is, in fact, for sure, since like 1955, Skunk Works, Lockheed Martin's place where they do all these like top secret building of bombers and who knows what, really. So, that is what's going on there. And with you're talking about the Gothic fire, that is stuff that's rooted in reality. I have a lot of opinions on what extraterrestrials may or may not be, and
Yeah.
what people think about when it comes to Area 51, because it's been so like Hollywood to think about it in one specific way. But it is for sure a place where our government does top secret testing and building with Lockheed Martin. That I think Lockheed Martin is behind most of the UFOs that we see in the sky.
That's like
So it's
Stephen Greer. Do you know Dr. Stephen Greer? Have you heard of him?
yeah, yeah. I've listened to him. Yeah.
Yeah, he says that. His theory is, yeah, okay, there's alien tech, but the aliens, the UFO sightings, these unidentified flying objects or whatever, what do we call them now? Unidentified or what's the
UAPs. Yeah.
UAPs, right?
Yeah. Silly.
He's saying that's actually government secret kind of programs, government funded secret programs that even high level people at the government don't know about. Like the
Yeah.
president isn't even privy to these,
Yeah.
and that they're just that's what people are actually saying, and then the government's not going to claim them. No one's going to claim them, so it's just UFOs.
Right. And this year we had a report that came out about the Pentagon lying about extraterrestrial stories to cover up for Lockheed Martin technology. So, add that to the mix. And then you can add stuff like Annie Jacobson wrote a book about Area 51 where she had a source that claimed to who worked at Area 51 and said they were mutilating autistic children to look like extraterrestrials to scare the Soviets. Now, I don't know if that's factual, but it's certainly something our government would do as like a psyop to scare people, because we're always a lab rat for whatever diabolical plan they've got going on. But when it comes to the Gothic fires, it was so interesting that all of a sudden happened on July 4th. Lightning struck, and there was 40,000 acres of fire in the desert. It's not a lot to burn out there, so that's
Right.
bizarre. A few months before that is when this news started to break that you were talking about. There's actually over 400 people who were Air Force vets that worked at Area 51 that are dead now. Over 400 people that they claim died because of the top secret projects they worked on. They only are allowed to say they worked on one of the bombers, but they worked on multiple projects. But they call it the invisible enemy. And they all got sick. They worked there in the 80s and 90s, and they came back together for like a reunion earlier last year, and they were all talking, being like, we all have insane cancer. We have like grapefruit sized tumors. One gentleman said it altered his DNA so much that it actually made his son be born with a brain tumor.
Oh,
There's
geez.
all different types of cancers. There's a man who's lost his tongue. So it's hard to just write it off as a coincidence when all these guys are super sick, and then over 400 people have died, according to what they say allegedly is this invisible enemy. So in my opinion, I think they're getting rid of stuff. I think there's stuff out there they're
Yeah.
just trying to get rid of, which can't be healthy for all of us if they're just burning this into the atmosphere. You can go back to the early 90s and look at, there's an article in SF Gate where there's a guy suing about his time at Area 51 because he was in charge of the burn pits, and the burn pits made him extremely sick, like had a cancer. So, when you're thinking about Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, what they're building, what kind of new, structures, chemicals, paints that they're using, and they're just throwing out there. They got to dispose of it somehow. If they're burning it, it's going to make you sick. It reminded me a lot of when our government used Agent Orange in Vietnam, and they thought, oh, we'll just use it on the enemy. Didn't really care how it would affect our own soldiers and then our soldiers' kids, right? So
Yeah.
it just seems to be the pattern with this stuff. And the other thing with those guys who are sick, that's so sad, they can't get any help from the VA because all of their work is data masked. So it's like they never really had the job. So the government and the VA can't be like, oh yeah, they
What?
have this. Yeah, they're like, you don't have cancer because of our work because we can't tell anybody about the work. So it's like it never happened. So there's this big
Wha
push to get people help. It's crazy.
But I mean, we know that they were servicemen, right? I mean, can't they
Yep.
don't they qualify just by virtue of being servicemen?
I would think so, but according to the stories, because it's such a top secret thing, it's made all of their records totally data masked. So it's like we know they worked in the Air Force and at Area 51, but we can't say anything else about it. They might as well have been like shuttle drivers, and they're just saying, not our problem.
That
Yeah,
doesn't even make sense. I mean, it's one thing to say, "All right, we can't say where you worked, we can't say what you worked on," but we could say you
yep,
were working you were in the military, and so therefore you
yep.
qualify for VA benefits. I mean, that's why do you think these service people do you think that they knew when they were going to work at Area 51 that later on they wouldn't receive any benefits for being in the military? Or maybe they weren't.
No,
Maybe at that point they weren't working for the military. Like you mentioned, maybe they
yeah,
were actually working for Lockheed Martin and maybe they didn't even realize it.
that's very possible. It sounds like a lot of these guys were handpicked for this job to build these whatever they are, right? And my theory is that the government's probably meddling with some really dangerous substances that the second they say to the VA, this is why they're sick, that blows open a whole can of worms that they're afraid of because they don't want, who knows who to find out about it and then do their own thing. So there's a huge push now to get those guys help because they are super sick. There's so
Yeah.
many that are sick. So it's really crazy. They have contained the fire, but it was 40,000 acres for like I think a week of fire around Area 51. So it's super dangerous stuff.
Yeah, and when I was reading about it, what was really crazy too is like the firefighters weren't even allowed to go, because it's like Department of Defense land. So the Department of Defense kept them out. So it's like nothing to see here, guys, right? Like,
Yep.
okay, yeah, it's burning near Area 51. Oh no, it's not a cover up, but you're not allowed to come in to see what we're covering up, by
It,
the
it
way.
happens. It happens all the time. On our show, we have callers, and I have a caller who was a former firefighter in Frederick, and that's where Fort Detrick is. That Fort Detrick was known nationally when the anthrax thing was going on because they
Yeah.
traced the anthrax back to this Fort Detrick. Uh, but there'd be a lot of fires that happen, and at a certain point, they wouldn't allow the firefighters in because they couldn't see what was going on. They're like burning monkeys. They're testing on animals. It's really crazy stuff. And that's just one place. Area 51, this place, Wright Patterson Air Force, those are just a handful of these places where some really extreme testing is going on.
I mean, but when it comes to Area 51, it seems that, I mean, have you been to Nevada? There's like nothing out there.
I have it.
It's,
Oh
I've
yeah, I have.
driven
It's empty. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've driven through Nevada a million times, trying to travel I'm from Idaho and going back and forth from Idaho to California, and you're just driving through, I mean, the entire state, there's just nothing. It's just
Right.
desert the whole way, absolutely nothing. So it's the perfect place to start testing like nukes, right? So
Hmm.
it makes sense to me also that these guys would all have cancer if they were around nuclear testing facilities, and
Exactly.
I mean, they all ended up like radiated.
I mean, we can't forget that in this area and surrounding areas, they were lining up soldiers in the 50s to watch bombs, explode just as a
Right.
test subject. So those guys, not all of them got sick, some did, or who knows what information they released about that. But that landscape has certainly been mutilated by atomic radiation over the
Yeah.
ages. And in the 50s, it was constant. They were bombing it constantly. And there's videos of that stuff. You can watch them line up, and they're just watching this atomic sunrise.
Uh, oh my gosh. I just am amazed that they're not getting any help. I mean, the only thing I can think is that maybe they were transferred to civilian work without them realizing they were moving on to civilian projects, that it was Lockheed Martin, which would be considered civilian.
Mhm. It's very
And
possible.
so
I would love to see Lockheed Martin have to testify then. Why are we outsourcing our soldiers to this place? Like, there's really no oversight on how much money we give them, the taxpayers, and what they're doing with it. It's like the one
yeah,
thing I ever heard AOC say that I agreed with was her saying she said there's no oversight on places like Lockheed Martin or Raytheon, and perhaps we should look into it. I'm like, I totally agree, because first
yeah,
of all, I don't agree with the military industrial complex, and they're like number one. And second of all, we are just constantly testing on our own soldiers, and I'd love to see that pattern stop, where we're
yeah,
constantly, they do it all the time. You can look at something like Operation Sea Spray in San Francisco in the early 50s, when they were testing how to fight biochemical warfare. So they chose to just spray chemicals into the sky and get people sick in San Francisco. Some people died, some people got really sick. So it's so unfortunate that this is just this pattern we're stuck in.
yeah. Do you think that there's really aliens? I mean, I so on one hand, I think, of course, because there's no possible way we're alone in the universe. I mean, there's just
Mm,
mathematically, statistically, it's just impossible to think we're the only people and that's it. And all the rest of
mm,
these planets are empty. Whether or not those others can make it this far, if they have the technology to make it this far, is another question, right?
mm.
But also, I kind of think, if aliens were real, if they existed, then why wouldn't we all be seeing them? I kind of feel like anything that's real, everybody, like everybody, it would we would have all had sightings and experiences, and not to, I mean, that's not to say that everybody would believe it. There's plenty of stuff out there that people see every day with their own eyes, and they still won't believe it. I mean,
Mhm.
it's like COVID was a good example of how crazy people can get and
Yep.
not believing science, for example, when you're like, hey, the vaccine does not stop the spread. You're still going
Yep.
to get COVID.
Yep.
And the people that still to this day are like, no, because it definitely stopped. And it's like, even though you had COVID 5 times, you still think it stopped the spread,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Like total lunacy in people's
Mhm.
brains. And I think the pandemic really showcased that. But even if people see something and it's completely verified through facts and science, there's still going to be a lot of people who don't believe. But everybody has access to that information. I mean, it's like it's not shrouded or hidden from us. So I just kind of feel like if aliens were real, we would have all seen them.
I think it's demons. I think we have like an ancient strain of evil that's been with humans forever, and they probably ingratiated themselves into humanity. So I think this evil walks amongst us. I mean, when you think of a story like Epstein, that to me is demonic. Those are evil
Yeah,
people, and they're feeding off human suffering. So that's what I think a lot of that is. But that's not to say people aren't experiencing these weird things. I get calls every night from people who can't explain what happened to them, and it sounds wacky to some people, but when you do this for years and you hear all these stories and they start to, you see a pattern. You could say it's military abductions. There's people who think the military is kind of posing as an alien to capture you,
right,
test on you. Honestly, I think nothing's out of beyond the reason here with what the government's willing to do to people. But I don't really believe in aliens in the way that Hollywood promotes it. I think there's something that can certainly visit us from another dimension, be it hell or however you want to look into it. But they possess people. I believe in possession. I've seen evil. You look at these like straight up pedophiles and how they just go after children. That's evil, evil, evil. I can't imagine, that being just human nature. I think there's something else
right,
attached to it that we can't explain. So, I think a lot of it has, they've branded aliens in this way that we have to think of it as something that's traveling from far away, or perhaps it's underwater. But I think it's something that we can't even comprehend. In my opinion, I think it's something just demonic. But in the UFO world, this is a controversial topic because everyone in that world has a different opinion on where they come from, what they look like. There's people who are whistleblowers now saying there's 4 different types of aliens. We got the Nordics, we got the reptiles, all these different things. We have the Greys, and there's theories about presidents like Eisenhower making pacts with the Greys. So, depending on where you look, you get any answer you want. But certainly something is happening. I have no idea what it is.
right. Well, to me, those are two separate things. Like whether or not there's demons and or even angels amongst us, or things
Mhm,
from a different dimension, like kind of
mhm,
interdimensional beings, which we'll get into. But,
Yeah.
that is a little bit different than UFOs and UFO sightings and aliens and these ideas that there's aliens. I mean, that aspect of it, like, what as an alien, what would be your motivation to just expose yourself to the government? Like, take me to your leader. Let me who's your leader? And now let me just
Mhm.
so happen to be captured by your government and experimented on by your government, and they're stealing and reverse engineering the tech, and, I mean, it's
Yep.
like, what would be now, I can understand the motivation if you are the government, right? If you are
Right.
the government and you're trying to develop this kind of weird tech and you're wanting to experiment on people, then you'd be shrouded in all kinds of secrecy, and you would maybe capture people and make them think, okay, there's aliens, and kind of brainwash them and then send them back to where they were and have them tell crazy stories and stuff. I see the motivation as a government to
Mhm.
plant that. But if you're an alien and you're coming from another world, you don't
Mhm.
care who you're just I would think you would expose yourself to just all of humanity and be like, "Look, we exist. Hey, here we are."
Yeah. I mean,
Like,
sometimes
another world is out there.
when you walk around DC, it feels like they are there. It feels like they've populated all of DC, honestly. But from the stories I've heard from people who really do believe that they were abducted, they feel
Yeah,
like they're being experimented on. I've heard so many similar stories of from people who say literally this is what they believe. They were carried out of their bedroom window and put on some craft, surrounded by gray aliens. That's like the typical gray alien with the big light bulb head and the big eyes, and that they all talked through telekinesis, and that they were doing stuff inside of them. I mean, I've heard people say they thought their souls were taken and switched out. I've heard from people that said they believe their bones were taken out and put back in. People who wake up with weird things in their head that they can't explain. So they truly do believe that they're being taken at, for the Greys at least, if you believe in the Greys, that they see humans as a sort of like a mouse, that they're just experimenting on us. Other people think that other aliens see us as a food source and that we're kind of like a mineral to them. I think when it comes to the things that people see in the sky, and I've seen it myself. My default is typically that is some super secret high tech stuff that we built, that Lockheed or Raytheon's doing, and it's like they did the Manhattan Project in secret for so long, and when that fell out
mm,
of the sky, it blew everyone's minds. Of course, they've been evolving that sort of weaponry and aircraft technology forever. And the same thing goes with everything. Like if you look at MK Ultra, they say they stopped MK Ultra, but I think they just evolved it into something else, right? Now it's expanded into
yeah.
more of a global situation.
Thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson show, which you can catch Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. It is free for you to watch. Again, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, KimIversonShow.com. See you there.